Hello and welcome to the Rocky Peak Young Adults Podcast. We meet Sunday nights at 7:30 at the church at Rocky Peak. For info on upcoming events, find us on Instagram at RP Young Adults. Enjoy the message.
Good evening, RPYA family. What's happening? Dude, Andrew Rush, awesome job, by the way. Awesome job. Andrew was in that video. He's awesome. He's right there. The blue guy with the muscles. Yeah, that guy. He's awesome. Anyways, we're in a series called Relationology, and I think he's single still. So, ladies, just want to help you out. We're in a series called Relationology. I'm Kelly. We're in week 3. I'm the pastor here. So if this is your very first time to RPYA, we're all so pumped that you came. And of course, yes, this is a place that you can belong no matter what you believe. And so we're just pumped that you're here, and we hope that you leave here with some friends. And that is the beginning of my sermon. Nice. Ooh, yeah. Boom. Where do I drop this mic? I don't know. Now, you know, when I was a kid, like 5 or 6, I always had a hard time distinguishing between what was real and what was fake. But there was one thing I knew that was really fake, which was like cartoons like Mickey Mouse, right? Mickey Mouse is obviously fake, right? No. Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, Beauty and the Beast is fake, right? Some of you guys are still on the fence about that because the things that I saw in cartoons, right, because the colors look completely different than reality, right? Like, they're super saturated. I saw an artist once, like, draw a Mickey Mouse and then animate his legs or animate the train, but his, like, body was the same, but, like, his arms were moving. And so, like, I've seen animation. So I got that when I was 6, cartoons were fake, and I was a boss like that. Because I knew as a 6-year-old, that's not real, Mickey. That's not real. But there's these other things, other types of animation that used to mess with my head. I don't know what to call it, but I called it real-ish. Real-ish. So you got fake, and then you have real-ish. And the real-ish stuff were like the animatronic type things. They're like, you know, puppets, but there was a human that corresponded with reality. And I was like, wait a minute, brain. He's talking to a dragon. And the dragon is talking back, and that's a human. And my 6-year-old brain could not figure out how that worked. So I thought they were both real. And I was looking for these dragons. So, like, one of the cartoons, I'll show you a picture. It's from my childhood. You definitely do not know what these are. But maybe you do. The first thing that used to mess with me, it's a real-ish thing, right? It's a very mythological creatures. They're called, it's a show called Fraggle Rock. Fraggle Rock. We have an image to show you right there. Fraggle Rock. And so the thing is, right, yeah, that's enough to give you some nightmares, right? That's just not okay for a 6-year-old to be watching. So the reality, like, to cartoons, different. This is a whole different category, right? Another one where we're a little bit cuter. They were called Muppet Babies, right? Just because you add the word baby at the end of it doesn't make it, like, cuter. Because clearly there's a red monster in the back that would freak me out, right? It's just, I didn't get it, right? I couldn't distinguish between what was real and what was fake. And then the last one was, the next one, Sesame Street. Dude, that was my jam, though. That was a little bit more palatable, but I still, like, had dreams of actually meeting Bert and Ernie. Like, I would, like, want to meet with them and hang out with them, like, as a 6-year-old. And tell me I'm not the only one. Am I the only one who's ever had fantasized about hanging out with the people on Sesame Street? All right, I'm not the only one. All right, there's 3 of us. But this last one really messed with me. There's a movie called The Never Ending Story. And it's about a kid. I know, right? It's the cutest thing ever. It's a kid who would, like, ride a Labrador Retriever dragon, right? And so, you know, the kid didn't have any allergies, clearly. He was fine. It was a hypoallergenic dragon. So really friendly, but vicious at the same time. So it just, I couldn't really quite understand the difference between, like, fake and real, because these were somewhat of a hybrid in between, but I didn't know that when I was 6. And I always wanted to ride a Labrador Retriever dragon. So one day, I'm sitting in a living room watching the Laker game. I wasn't really watching, I just saw it was on. And I'm 6 years old, and in this living room, there's a house. I mean, it's a house and there's a dog. And my parents walk out of the room, and I'm bored out of my mind, as one would be watching basketball, and as a 6-year-old would be at least. And I'm looking at the screen, and I'm looking at the dog. And then I look at the screen again. And then I look at the dog again. And then I tell the dog to come over. And then slowly, because I knew I couldn't attack from the front. I had to wait till the dog wasn't looking. And so I would go behind the dog, and I counted to 3. I took a big breath because I was going to do this. 1, 2, 3. And that's how I got the scar on my cheek. And I've lived with that scar since I was 6 years old because I tried to ride a Labrador Retriever dog. And because I didn't know the difference between mythology and reality. I didn't know the difference between mythology and reality, so I ended up with a scar on my face. But the reality is, when it comes to relationships, there are childhood myths that we believe, that we bring into our adulthood, that leave us scarred or leave other people scarred. See, there's things in our childhood that we believe, that we were told, but nobody told us otherwise. And we brought it into our adulthood, and we get into these relationships, and we do our best with what we know or what we think we know, and then we end up scarred. And we carry those scars with us throughout our whole lives. And so today, what I want to talk about are 3 myths that we carry into our adulthood that we really need to get rid of, because they're childhood myths. And if we do not reconcile these myths, we will be left with scars. And we will be left leaving scars on other people. So as we get into God's word, we can get the clock rolling. That'd be great. I want us to go to the first myth. So go ahead and open your programs and go to myth number 1. And I want you to write in there. Myth number 1. Just because it looks good doesn't mean it's always good. See, that's a myth that we believe. But that's a childhood myth, right? Something that we believe growing up. But of course we know that's not true. But somehow when it comes to relationships, we kind of seem to be falling into the same trap over and over again. And you know what I want to say, actually, because as I was, thinking about this myth, just because it looks good doesn't mean it actually is good. Oh yeah, by the way, I changed my point like twice. So it says beautiful on the screen, but I wrote it down. I want you to put looks good. But just because it looks good doesn't mean it is good. Paul, in 1 Corinthians 13, he was actually dealing with this in a church that was really focused on the outward appearance, really focused on what was happening with the manifestations of the gifts of the Spirit, or even speaking in tongues, or hoping for miracles. And there might be people here today that are just like, man, I just want a miracle. Like, I just want to see God manifest himself in a spectacular way. I want to see God move, right? And I know there's people here that are like that. And there's people in the Bible that were looking for that too. And Paul addresses them and says, hey, be careful. Just because it looks good doesn't mean it is good. And I would even push it even further. Just because it feels good doesn't always mean it's good either. And this is what he says. He says, if I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but I do not have love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. So he's talking towards elegance or eloquence, right? Just because he's eloquent, or the lack of eloquence in my situation right now, right? Just because you hear an awesome poem, or he can deliberate masterful thoughts and help you understand it in a great way, doesn't necessarily mean it's loving, because you can say the right thing the wrong way and you're still wrong, right? So beware of eloquence. Ladies, gentlemen, just because it comes in a poem, just because it sounds good, beware of eloquence, guys, girls. The second thing I want you to know about this particular point, beware of beauty. Beware of beauty. King Solomon, he wrote 3 books in the Bible, and he was known to be the wisest person in all of history, because he was blessed with knowledge and he was blessed with wisdom from God, It's the one thing that he asked from God, but God was so impressed by his request just for wisdom, he gave him everything else. He gave him influence, he gave him money, he gave him land, he gave him the kingdom. And he wrote 3 books. And one of the books is the book of Proverbs. And it's a book that I like to read every month because there's 31 Proverbs in a month. And so I read 1 proverb a day, or 31 days in a month, typically. And I read 1 proverb a day. And in Proverbs 11:22, he speaks to the idea that beauty is not always what it seems. He says this, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. See, it's really hard to say no to a beautiful woman or a beautiful guy for that matter. I've talked to lots of women who are deathly attracted to athletes. Like, I can talk till I'm blue in the face about how that guy is not good for her. But time and time again, there's something that happens in some of these people's brain that where they look at me with a blank stare and they're like, but he's hot. And the same thing with guys, but she's hot. And I'm like, that just doesn't matter. And Solomon says, hey, let's show a picture of a pig with a gold ring, right? See, Solomon says the hotness factor is the equivalent to a gold ring in the totality of a pig, especially if they lack discretion. So you can have somebody with bad character that looks hot, but the totality of their value is whatever's in their nose. See, the problem is we got a lot of guys chasing after gold rings, not realizing that they're attached to pigs. There's a lot of girls chasing after gold rings, not realizing they're attached to pigs. So beware of beauty. It's deceiving. Beware of biology, too. Because just because someone's got arms, abs, whatever, metabolism, like, it is just, does not mean anything to what a relationship needs for sustainability. I get it. I know why it's hard. I know why it's difficult. There's 2 reasons why it's difficult. Focalism and pheromones. See, focalism is when you have a baby and you take away, like, say if a baby is playing with a wheel of a car. This happened to me the other day. The kid is playing with the broken wheel of a car. And the parent takes the wheel away in order to fix the car. But the kid wants the wheel at all cost. So you take the wheel away and you try to give him the whole car. He says, no, I don't want the car, right? He wants the one thing at the exclusion of everything. And what happens with some of us, most of us, we get focused on what we can't have at the exclusion of all the things that we can have. That's called focalism. Pheromones. That is a hormone that's secreted by mammals, and all of us are mammals. And what happens is, in your brain, you see somebody that strikes you, or, in your brain, whatever you've decided to be beautiful, you see that walk into the room, and your brain, your spider senses go up like, bing. And I don't know what kind of story goes on in your head. You're thinking about, wedding plans, whatever. You don't even know who she is. Or who he is. And they walk into the room and you're like, bing, and you're like, oh my gosh, if only we would like lock eyes, that would be my sign I should go in, right? And then you lock eyes and you're like, whoa, this is the thing. This could be the one. And then your brain starts firing off endorphins and dopamine, basically giving you rewards for the type of behavior that you were anticipating. And so you're like, oh my gosh, I think she likes me. And then you walk over and then she smiles because she invites you into that conversation. And the guy's like, ah! And he's talking to the girl and the hormones are going all over the place. He can't even think straight. Pause. Just so you know, if you're under 24, your prefrontal cortex has not fully developed. So you have all this stuff that's going on in your brain, And then she gives you her number, and just everything's going nuts. And then before she leaves, her hand just brushes against your hand. Explosion, right? Your brain is just going nuts, right? And you're about to make decisions about your future, and you are completely high, and you have half a brain, and this is the worst possible scenario to make a good decision. Pheromones, focalism. I get it. It's hard to deny this myth, but just because it's glittery, just because it's shiny, just because it looks good, just because it feels good, doesn't mean it is good. Character trumps abs. Character trumps beauty. That's myth number one. Myth number two. Myth number two is the right person myth. The right person myth. The right person myth. The right person myth. The right one. See, this myth says, hey, if I find the right one, everything's going to be all right. Right? Right. No? Right? If I find the right one, then everything will be all right. And this myth is perpetuated through Hollywood. You know that movie called The Notebook? You've ever heard The Notebook? Right? The Notebook, right? Right. So this, I'm making all you Christian kids blush. All right. I was like, that was a quick one. Good. So the premise goes like this. You see a girl, pretty girl, engaged to a guy, douchey guy, right? Really bad guy. But there's another guy in the party who they lock eyes, and he's got half a brain too. And his stuff's going all crazy too in his brain, his like reward system. And they end up talking. But then again, she has to leave because she's going away with her fiance. And then throughout the movie, they get married. He ends up becoming abusive. She runs away. But destiny would have it that the dude at the party would run into the girl. This is the right person. And the audience eats this up. So lo and behold, while she's still married, they find themselves finding shelter because it's raining. Of course, we need to find shelter in this house and make a fireplace. Oh, there's no clothes. We'll just take it off. And it's this, and you're watching this. You're clearly, you're critiquing my critique of the movie. I know I didn't watch it very recently. But I did know that scene. It was before I found Jesus, okay? It was way. And so the directors and the storytellers are perpetuating a myth that says, if I find the right person, then everything will be all right. Right? Wrong. Very wrong. Because the reality is I think most people believe that. Because what happens if you believe this myth, if you're looking for the right person constantly and you get married to someone who you quote unquote think is the right person, and then one day you wake up and you're like, uh-oh, they don't smell as good as I thought. They don't do the dishes as much as I thought. He doesn't wash his clothes. He doesn't serve me. I don't feel the same feelings that I felt when I was high. And I was young. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe this is not the right person. Maybe I need to go find them. And they exchange husband number one for husband number two. And husband number two for husband number three. And the best way to prevent a divorce is not to get married to the first guy. Because currently the statistic for divorce is 50%. Right, this is 50% of us in this room are going, or 50% of us who get married are going to get a divorce. 63% of us who exchange the first one in for a second one also get a divorce. And 73% of us who exchange the second one in order to find the right one will also get a divorce. 73% of third marriages fail, all because of their search for the right one. My suggestion is instead of searching for the right one, is focus on becoming the right one. You will ultimately attract people who are like you. You don't want to attract someone who's trying to find the right one. Because when you're focused on finding the right one, that usually comes at the neglect of becoming the right one. But it would be awesome if you were focused on becoming the right one. And you found somebody else, or not even found somebody, so you just happen to be living life next to somebody who's also focused on becoming the right one. And this person, they took responsibility for their successes and their failures. They owned up. They didn't avoid failure, they failed, but they learned from their failures. And these people are focused on becoming the right one. So the question that I want to ask is, what does the right one look like? Because I'm sure you have a list in your head that maybe you've written it down. I know some of you ladies wrote it down. Hopefully you crossed out abs. I almost bought a six-pack shirt just to wear today and just put it under my ass. You want abs? There's your abs. And maybe you have a list. And the thing is, on your list, I hope that you would not hold somebody to a standard that you wouldn't be willing to hold yourself to. That you would be able to answer the question, are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? So you can actually, that would be, well, logical and kind. But the best part about this passage that we're looking at today in 1 Corinthians is that Paul tells us what love looks like. So we don't have to guess on our own. And that if you could today give up on the idea of love as a feeling and accept that love is a verb, you'll get much further, much faster in your relationships. And maybe you'll end up with less scars. So 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4, tells us what it looks like to actually become the right person. See, you can defeat the right person myth with the right person list. It says this: love is patient. Love is kind. It doesn't envy and it doesn't boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Wow, it gives rewards. I like that. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Okay, so let's break this down. So what is love? What are the verbs? There's 12 verbs. There's 12 action points to what love is and what love is not. All right? So when we think about the word love, I'm not talking about a feeling, and we should not be chasing a feeling, because let me just tell you, people don't fall into love, they fall into lust, right? What you're feeling is the craziness that's happening in your brain. What you are feeling is infatuation. What you're feeling is curiosity. But the kind of love that sustains is agape love. And that's a love that requires sacrifice. And the greatest sacrifice that you can give somebody is time. I heard a pastor this week say, the way the Bible spells love is time. So all of these verbs takes time. It takes time. So let's look at the first one. Love is patient. It's not pushy. Love is patient. It's not pushy. This is a love that refuses to be someone's regret on a date. This is a love that refuses to push somebody faster and further than they want to go. This is a love that says, I will go at your pace and not make you feel bad for it. As slow as you want to go. I'm not going to push you into anything. Patience is a pearl that God wants to develop in all of our lives. It's also a fruit of the Spirit. And the pearl of patience is developed over time. And the reason why I call patience a pearl is much like the way pearls are developed inside oysters. You know how that happens, right? Most of us know a little bit of oceanography. And what happens is a grain of sand gets lodged inside of an oyster. and it irritates the oyster for a long time. And over lots of time, that grain of sand turns into a pearl. But it takes a lot of time of irritation. So if you want to grow in patience, expect irritation. Expect it. Expect it. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is kind. Now, kindness is an interesting definition. Kindness is how you respond to somebody else's perceived weaknesses. Kindness, you want to know if you're a kind person? How do you respond to somebody else's perceived weakness? Do you kind of push them to like, hey, get on my level, hurry up? Or do you lend them your strength? See, kind people lend them their strength. Let me loan you my strength. I see you struggling, let me help you. See, that's kindness. Kindness is how you respond to other people's perceived weaknesses. Love doesn't envy. See, envy is a bad one. Envy is like one of the deadliest, underrated sins. Envy is what killed Abel. Envy is what crucified Jesus. See, they wanted something they couldn't have, so they crucified him. They crucified Jesus. Envy says this: I don't feel good about myself, so I can't let you feel good about yourself. Just in case you didn't catch that. Envy says, I don't feel good about myself, so I can't let you feel good about yourself. These are the people, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm preaching to myself. These are the people that hear something good about someone else and says, yeah, but, and then proceeds with a bunch of negative indictments on their person's character. That's what envy does. Love doesn't boast. Now, this is hard for some of us guys. See, boasting is just talking excessively about your accomplishments. That somebody cannot tell you about their accomplishments without you trying to one-up them. It's like you're out on a date and the girl's like, hey, I went out fishing with my dad and we caught a 3-pound bass, right? And you're like, really? Well, my dad's on the fishing network, right? So like that would be boasting, right? Trying to one-up people is actually the opposite of love. Love doesn't dishonor. Dishonor. The best way I can define dishonor is by kind of like looking at the word honor. So think of a celebrity or someone you respect, a musician or a highly prestigious person. And say I gave you enough money to take that person out on a date or just out to dinner, right? It could be someone of the same gender and you're just going out to dinner with this person. And I just gave you, hey, here's $500. Make sure they're taken care of, right? And you're like, $500, great. We're going to Lowry's, and I like steak, just in case that person's me. So you guys go out, right? But wouldn't you defer to them? Hey, where would you like to eat? Hey, you would hold the door open for them. You would drive. You would actually think, hey, what are some good talking points? Or is that just me? Like I always Google, hey, what are some good talking points? But you wouldn't talk about yourself. You'd be interested in them. And so you'd ask them questions, right? You would be a part of their life. You would not be focused on yourself. You'd be focused on them. But you would hold them in high esteem, right? You would treat them better than you would treat yourself, right? And that's what honor means. So love does not dishonor. Love honors. And so the thing is, men, you need to hear this closely. We live in a society that dishonors women hands down, right? It's in the music we listen to. It's in the images that we see. And it's the addictions that we tend to. And I know women have struggled with the same thing. Because we live in a society that tells women to take me, use me, and when you're done with me, cast me aside. And that's what most of the music's about. And I feel like I say this every week, and I can't get it. I can't say it enough. Pornography is one of the most destructive things that you can do to your relationships. Because it trains your brain to treat women like commodities. And the longer you watch content or hear content that treats women like commodities, guess what you're going to do? You're going to treat them like commodities also. Like they're objects for your enjoyment. And so, if you're struggling with pornography, there's two things that I want to encourage you to do. Number one, get the book, Every Young Man's Battle. Memorize it because I know you're probably too embarrassed to write it down in front of somebody else. Two, download Covenant Eyes. The reason why I appreciate covenanteyes.com is because it's not going to stop you from looking at porn. It's just going to email everybody that you have as your accountability partner. And you can make me your accountability partner. McCoy@rockypeak.org. All right? Covenant Eyes and Every Young Man's Battle. Ladies, you can do the same thing. If you're struggling in internet pornography, download Covenant Eyes and get some accountability partners in your life. Because the last thing you want to do is look at people as objects for your affection, as objects for your pleasure. That's the worst thing you can do to another person who belongs to God as his child. We need to start seeing people the way God sees them. And that's by choosing to stop seeing them as objects. Love is not self-seeking. Self-seeking. See, when you have two people who are selfish, and you can find out real fast if someone's selfish. I love this. I love this. So if you are selfless in a relationship, just be completely selfless, right? If you go on a date with somebody and it's like maybe first or second date and you notice that they just keep taking and you keep giving, that means, you know what that means? Then you need to start running, right? If you keep giving and they keep taking, you start running. That's the equation, okay? You can write that down, take it to the bank, all right? And you can even tell me, you can tell him or her, hey, my pastor told me to run from you because you keep taking and I keep giving. It's time for me to start running. Peace. All right. Love is not easily angered. That just means it takes a long time to make you angry, right? Do you like fly off the handle just like at the smallest offense or like someone, just the smallest thing that you just cannot let things go, right? Love takes a long time to get angry. You don't get angry very easily. Are you described as a person who gets angry very easily? You're not very loving. You should not be in a relationship. Ladies, if you're attracted to a strong, muscly man, and he has an anger problem, you can run too. You should run as far and as fast as possible. My mom did not. And she had the scars to prove it. Because she fell into the beauty trap. That just because it looked good, just because it felt good, doesn't necessarily mean it was good. Guys with anger issues should not be in relationships. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. Whoa, now this is a hard one. This is something I struggle with. When love does not keep a record of wrongs, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't know that someone's wronging you. It just means that when you're not trying to catch somebody like messing up, like, ha, gotcha, I told you were like this, you're just like your mother, right? You don't want to end up in that type of situation. It's really bad for your relationships and your marriage. So I've been caught doing that. So keeping a record of wrongs means this. You just have a short memory when it comes to being offended. You're not easily offended. It takes a long time. And what I love about verse 7, it's not on there, but verse 7, we can go back to the 1 Corinthians verse 7. And this part seems really weird. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. This seems mythological to me. This seems irrational, almost delusional. Love bears all things? Like I'm just going to let myself endure all things? I'm going to believe all things? See, this right here, what this means is that sometimes there are gaps. There are gaps. So there's gaps between expectation and reality when it comes to your relationships, right? You said you were going to be home by 7 o'clock. You showed up at 8 o'clock. There's a gap between expectation and reality, right? You said that you were going to text me when you got to the place, blah, 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 and, it's 1 o'clock now. I was expecting you to text me at 10 o'clock, right? There's a gap. Does that make sense? Whenever you're offended, there's a gap between expectation and reality. What love does is fill in the gap with the best possible explanation for this person's behavior. They are innocent until proven guilty. See, you believe the best about people. You give them the best possible explanation to fill in that gap. That's what love does. And that's what that means. So far, so good? Myth number 3. This is funny. Myth number 3 is the happily ever after. Happily ever after myth. And we'll live happily ever after, just like Peter Pan and Wendy. Oh, Peter Pan and Wendy, you're so wrong. They're not together, but he didn't grow up and he lived happily ever after. I'm not saying relationships have to be romantic. Right, just go with it. Like Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella. But this happily ever after myth, I just couldn't figure out a way to say it, but it really is I don't want to grow up. I don't have to grow up. Because in the end, it's all going to work itself out. See, it's a myth that says I can continue thinking like a child and it's all going to work out. That's the myth. The myth is I don't have to grow up. And I love the way Paul concludes this love section. And he says, when I was a child, verse 11, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man or woman, I put childish ways behind me. So in the context of love, when he was a child, he loved like a child. He thought about love like a child would think about love. He reasoned about love like a child would reason about love. But when he became a man, he put those childish things behind him. And seriously, if we continue to think in the right person myth or the looks good myth, we're going to end up scarring ourselves and others. Because that's childish thinking. See, children don't know the difference between the truth and lies necessarily. Sometimes children don't know the difference between reality and mythology. But mature people, they're able to let go of mythology and embrace the truth, even if it doesn't feel good. See, the difference between children and adults in this particular context is that children care more about their feelings than they do about the truth. But mature people are more concerned with the truth than they are about their feelings. See, the kind of love that we're talking about that sustains is not a feeling. It's a verb. And so if you stop chasing after feelings, you might end up with a love worth keeping. And if you stop focusing on finding the right one and start becoming the right one, you actually might go somewhere. So what are the myths? Just because it's shiny doesn't mean it's gold. If you find the right one, not everything's going to be all right. And you will eventually have to grow up, because if you continue to live according to these myths, you will end up with scars. And as I conclude, I'm going to invite the band up. I love how Paul closes his chapter completely. He says, there's 3 things that remain. There's only 3 things that remain. Like, I gave you the 12 lists. I want you to focus on the list. I want you to study the list. I want you to practice the list. Practice the list, please. Reject the myths, practice the list. There's 3 things that remain, Paul says: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love, agape love. See, why isn't faith and hope the greatest? Because you're not going to need faith in heaven. You're not going to need hope in heaven. But love is the only thing that you will carry with you. Because your faith and hope will be fulfilled when you are in front of Jesus Christ. But the love that you carry from this earth to eternity will remain. Might I please implore you, stop focusing on getting love. Start focusing on becoming the kind of person that practices love. And stop looking for love. Stop looking for a feeling. Stop looking for someone to satisfy your insecurities. Stop looking for someone to satiate your loneliness. Because Jesus says, I am the truth. And that truth will set you free. There's no human being on earth that can satisfy the longing of your heart. No human being, no marriage, no relationship that can satisfy the hole in your heart. But Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth. He is the way. And He is the way to life, and He is the truth. He's not the feeling. He's the truth. Now, I'm not saying you don't speak the truth in love. Of course you speak the truth in love. You speak the truth and you resist the urge to pummel someone, right? You speak the truth and you're patient with it, right? You withhold any unnecessary judgment, but you still speak the truth. And I hope that you've been able to hear the truth today and make a decision to grow up out of our adolescent view of love and into maturity. Because without love, you can't love God. John 4:7-8 says, whoever does not love does not know God. I'm talking to you people who consider themselves Christ followers. Listen close. Especially if you're harboring bitterness in your heart, may today be a day where you let that go. It says, whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. And whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. You're not off the hook. Love is a verb, not a feeling. And before you get into a relationship, start practicing love. The best way to know if somebody is going to be loving is by their past practices. The past is a better indication of the future than a promise. And if today you realize that, you know what, there's some things on this list that I need to really practice, I would say hold off. Hold off. You have permission to hold off. Practice patience and slow down. And maybe today you need to focus on that list. And that's exactly what I want you to do this week. See, what I want you to do is study this list. 1 Corinthians 13, burn it into your brain. Study the list. Practice the list and reject the myths. Study the list, practice the list, and reject the myths. I want you to know the difference between real love and fake love is agape. And knowing the difference between finding the right one and becoming the right one will make all the difference. And I hope that tonight you choose to grow up in your view of love, sex, and dating. And my prayer is a lot of things, but I wonder what it would look like if we actually started practicing this list. What would happen to the divorce rate, huh? Do you think that this room would be the like the best room of people that had the most fulfilling, lasting relationships, that we wouldn't have to be a statistic because we chose to follow what love does? And we chose to ask the question, what does love in this situation require of me? Like, what would happen to our friendships at work if we were all selfless? What would happen to our schools? What would happen to your home? What would happen to your relationship with your boyfriends or your girlfriends? What would happen to your future marriage if you made this list something that you practiced now? I hope that you would do that today. Would you kindly stand with me and as we pray and close out? Father, I pray that we would become sons and daughters today who are patient and kind, who don't envy and who don't boast, who are not self-seeking, who are not easily angered, who practice mature love in preparation for eternity. Father, I pray that you would lift the scales off of our eyes so that we can see what love is, which is not a feeling and is not self-seeking. I pray that we would be selfless in our efforts to love the people around us selflessly, not an attempt to get what we want, but just in an attempt to just be obedient and to be an overflow of what we have received from you. So, Father, we give you this time. We give you our hearts. We give you our hands, and we give you our feet. In Jesus' name, we all said, amen.